I'm going to go through the process of how we purify the water. So we have taken some time, we've filled up the tank here. In fact, right now it's probably only partially full. But in the future, we could do this even though we have a little bit of water, but it'll take a little bit longer time if you have a full tank, okay? So I think we're about halfway, if I'm not mistaken, on this. A tank like this should probably take about, normally about 15 minutes to purify.
Okay, great.
Maybe 10 minutes if the liquids are, you know, if they've been used several times and they're really potent. So, but what I'd like to do is I'm going to show you how the purifier works. The first steps we're going to take is we're going to remove the plug and the cap. There we go. There's the plug and here's the cap. And we're going to loosen the hose from this point right here and drop this down. This will actually go into the bottom location. Okay. And this one I need to loosen, and then I'm just going to turn this hose and go like that. So I'm going to loosen this fitting right there so that I could turn it. I don't want to twist the hose and kink it, okay? But now that we've got that in place, I can put that back in place. Here's this hose, or this clamp as well. We've got a total of 5 clamps we need to check to make sure that they're secure. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, and the 5th one is right down here. And I can see that they're all secure and ready to go. The next step is for me to open up this valve right here. And it's very important that we open this valve because if we don't, there is a possibility that we could burn up the pump that is on the inside that is feeding through that hose. So we need to make sure that that is always open. For our next step, we're going to pull out our cup, this bottle right here, and this table salt. If you could hold that for me for just a moment, please. We're going to pour and fill this entire cup with it's a quarter of a cup of salt. We're going to fill this all the way up to the edge. And I put that back in my bucket. Here we go. We will take that salt and just pour it right into this container here. Now the thing that we always do with all of our tools is that we're going to put this back in our bucket. Our bucket, we will find out that it's very important that we just keep everything in there. That way we don't lose anything. There's some other reasons as well. So we're going to take this and we're going to fill this up with water. All right, now we'll put the cap back on. And for those of you that like Jimmy Buffett, we lost our shaker of salt here. We gotta shake this up a little bit.
It's like a liter, no?
Yes, exactly. That's a liter, a 1 liter bottle. And with that, we had a little bit of salt in the bottom, and now we shake it up. And we dissolve all the salt that's in there. So now we don't see any salt at the bottom of the container, okay? And again, this is the water where we've dissolved some salt into it. We're going to go up to the maximum line. So I'm going to pour this liquid in here. Up until the maximum line, there it is, okay? And then I'm going to pour the remainder of the salt water over on this side, just like so. I'm going to put the cap back on here. And we just hand tighten this. It actually has some Teflon tape on there so that it keeps a good vacuum seal, okay? So every now and then you might need to replace that Teflon, okay? From there then, you can see I didn't fill this up yet to the maximum line. So I'm going to get another little bit of water here.
Do the same process, basically.
Do the same process, but this is just going to be plain water
Okay.
as opposed to salty water. No more salt for the second time. There we go. We will pour this liquid then, it's just plain water, in until I get to the maximum line here. And it could be an approximation there, just anywhere in that area. And in fact, it could be anywhere between the maximum and the minimum lines here. So it's not a problem. I usually fill it up just so we have the maximum heat exchange. I'm just going to throw the rest of that water away. And we'll put our water bottle into our bucket. We will hook up the water pump to the battery. The red clip goes to the positive lead, the black clip goes to the negative lead. When we plug in the black and the red leads to our battery, then the first thing we should see is we should start seeing some bubbles coming in from the water purifier. If we don't see bubbles, then we have a problem. We have to troubleshoot it to make sure that we do have bubbles. If you don't see these bubbles when you plug it in, then we need to troubleshoot. And so what we want to look at first here is to make sure that this valve is open. If this valve is not open, then you can see there's no water flow going through, and we could actually burn up the water pump. So we want to be careful. I'm going to turn it back on here so we can get the flow going again. You can actually tell that the water is flowing by looking right here. You can see that this is clear. There's no bubbles there, but this whole area down through here is all saturated with bubbles. And what is happening is that our Venturi is actually injecting air into the water, and so we know that it's working properly. If we don't see bubbles like this occurring, it could be one of 5 reasons. The first being is that maybe our valve never got open to begin with. And if that's the case, the pump could be burning up in here because the water's not flowing properly. Secondly, we might have left this lid off right here. You can see I'm loosening it up. If that lid is maybe just left in place like so, again, there's no vacuum, and so there's no bubbles. And so I'm going to just screw this back down. You'll see the bubbles come up. Okay, that's working beautifully. Number 3 is if this hose maybe got loose somehow, or maybe it's not sealed properly. Sometimes we might need to just make sure and adjust it, and then just plug it back in. Might need a piece of tape possibly to make sure that it's correct. The fourth thing that we want to check is this section right here in the back. And if our purifier is not working properly and we don't have a good flow, it could be that our Venturi is not providing good suction. So I'm going to remove this, and I just put my finger down here. You can feel that there's a good suction coming up there's a little ball check valve there. Here, come here and you can feel this and see what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Feel that suction?
Yeah, it sucks, yeah.
It's very strong. Here, go ahead and take a look here, Pastor. Don't do what Dan Lee did. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to put this back on. This is actually another check valve. This is a check valve, and this is a one-way check valve as well. When I blow one way, it does not allow air to go through. When I blow the other way, it does allow air to go through. So this is a one-way check valve that allows the air to go this way, but doesn't allow the water to go this way. The fifth item on our checklist, that if all of these items are proper, if you find that the battery is dead, that could be our fifth item. But really, if the battery is dead, it probably was our first item to begin with. But I wanted you to check to make us sure that especially this valve was open and that we weren't burning the pump up. So we'll check. If you don't hear the pump in the background, which I can lightly hear the pump, if you don't hear that in the background, most likely the battery is dead. Another way to test it to make sure that the battery is working properly is we can actually remove this hose here and you'll see water coming out, kind of like what I was doing. That way you know that the battery is working properly. Thank you. Gentlemen, I'd like for you to take a look over at those trees right over there and the birds in them. See if you can find some birds. I'm going to modify the purifier and we're going to do a little troubleshooting right now. Okay, you go ahead and look this way. Good, now why don't you come on up here and we're going to look at this. Now let's say the very first item, I didn't turn this off because again, I don't want to burn that pump up, but if that was like this, the first thing you're going to check is you're going to open this up. So that's number one, okay? What was number two? Do you remember what we checked number two?
Number two is if this is kind of
The cap?
the cap is
Yeah.
loose.
Wow, it looks like it's loose. Okay, wow. I wonder why that is
Okay.
loose. It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't.
No. That's good. Okay, that's great.
Okay.
But for some reason, that's still not it. What was number three?
Number three. Three was this one.
Yeah, well, number three is actually the tube right here.
that's the
But
tube. Okay, yeah.
pull that down just a little bit. Maybe it might come loose. Ah,
Okay.
oh wow. If you look back here, there it is.
Okay.
And go ahead and connect that back up.
Okay.
Now let's see. Oh, look, you can see the water rising and now we see the bubbles working.
Okay, great.
So again, we don't start this process, the electrolysis process, until we have those bubbles.
Okay.
Okay, so the fourth item again was what? It was checking the check valves. And the fifth item was?
Well, it was
The battery. The battery. But the battery we know is working, isn't it? Okay. If the battery was not working, then it was probably the first thing that was, nothing else would be working either.
Listen to the sound of the.
Yeah, you can listen to the sound of the pump.
Yeah.
So very good. Excellent students. Great job, guys. Thank you. I'm going to loosen these wires now that we can start the electrolysis. And we're going to plug them into our battery as well. I like to just take them completely loose. And I just tuck them in behind here, like so. From there, we're going to go, again, red to positive and black to negative on our battery. And so we're going to start the electrolysis process in just 1 second. Okay, when we hook up the wire to our battery, the next step that we're going to see is that we're going to see some air bubbles coming right across here. And those bubbles are, we're actually starting to make chlorine. Once I plug in the wires, those blue leads here, I check this and make sure that I see air bubbles. You'll see a bunch of small bubbles and then you'll see a large bubble come across. And that way I know I'm making chlorine. I'm going to get a tester here out of my bucket. And this is a chlorine test kit. I'm going to just lay it up here because we're going to use this quite for a little while. And I'm going to test to make sure that I'm making chlorine by putting this square part right into the nozzle of this faucet, just like so. Usually that keeps me from getting wet, so it doesn't spray all over the place. I'm going to take one droplet, and if the water turns yellow, I know I'm making chlorine. If the water turns orange, like what I see here, I know I'm making a lot of chlorine. So this is a very good sign here that the purifier is working very nicely, okay? So you can see here, it's orange. If it goes past the yellow scale and it's orange, we know we've got very good mix there. We don't have to test from this point again. We're going to test from this point here. From here on is the chlorinated water, because we inject the chlorine with this tube. It's a chlorine gas. And then, but before that, as the water is coming out of the tank, we can actually test the water that's in the tank by going to this valve. There we go. And I usually just shake this down just a little bit. There's a little line that we look at in here. And I'm going to put a droplet. There we go. Now, the good thing is, it's just in this short amount of time, we already have some chlorine that's showing here, okay? What we want to do, because your water is coming from the city, is we're going to go up to this level 2. When it's a level 2, I know that I have enough water or enough chlorine in there to kill all the bacteria. But we don't need to, like normally if a river was going by and we're pulling the water out of a river, then I would shock it up to a level 5 because I really want to get a lot of chlorine in there and kill that bacteria. But I know that this water is coming from a good source. I'm going to pour that out. One of the things we're going to do now is, let me show you how to read. We're going to learn how to read the different levels here. Okay, I can see it got even darker just in that, just a little bit of time that we were talking. So as I look out here, I look at it and I compare it to this scale here. This is 1/2, 1, 2, 3, and 5. When we start initially, it usually starts out as clear, the water being clear if there's no chlorine in it. Then it goes to a very light yellow like this 1/2. Already this is between a 1 and a level 2. I'm looking at the level and I would say it's darker than 1. I would say it's probably a 2 right now, which means that we are completely done in purifying our water. What I want to show now is how we remove the liquids and remove the water purifier to put it away. So the first step is I'm going to remove our wire and we're going to put it away in our test kit, in our bucket, excuse me, not our test kit, but we're going to remove that and put it in our bucket. Secondly, I'm going to remove this fitting. I'm also going to close this fitting so that we don't lose any water. As we open this up, we're going to have just a little water come out, and that's normal. I'm going to put this cable that's all curled up just across like so, and that transports very nicely that way. And that way it's easy to remove. You don't have to unwind it every time. At this point, I'm going to move and point this fitting downwards. And I'm going to take this hose, and I'm going to put this like so. And basically we have a hermetic seal all the way around where lizards and spiders and other animals can't get in there. So it's all nice and tight. I'm going to put our cap on. There we go. Put our cap on. By the way, I'm going to take our chlorine test kit and I'm going to put it back in our bucket. Everything stays in our bucket. I'm going to also take this plug. We'll plug off the fitting here. And just pull those levers back and that will hold that in place. Now to remove the liquids. This is probably one of the most important things that we need to talk about. The liquids that we have in here are poisons. And I need to make sure that whatever we do, that we need to be very safe with this. For example, I don't want to, because these liquids, we've got 100% raw chlorine. Now, if you know what bleach is like, bleach is 7% chlorine and 93% water. This is 100% chlorine, okay? This is very strong. So anytime we work with it, we're going to work with it from a distance. As we get ready to open this up, I feel the wind coming at me this way. So I want to move around and I'm going to open up the chlorine, this chamber. In fact, I'm going to step down and open it up from down here so that the wind is blowing this chlorine smell away from me. I have 2 bottles here that we're going to use to remove the liquids that have been used in this process. The first bottle is a small bottle that will hold the chlorine, and the second is a larger bottle, which you can see, which goes with a larger tube that is where we keep the sodium hydroxide. I've actually marked chlorine on the smaller bottle and sodium hydroxide on the larger bottle. We have to be very careful when we remove these liquids so that we don't get them on our skin, or you don't want to smell it or breathe it or even get it in your mouth, okay? We have to be careful with the chlorine, especially. The smell is very toxic and it can really overcome you if you're not careful, okay? The other part of this is if you get the sodium hydroxide on your skin, you need to make sure that you wash it off with some water down below. Be careful not to get any of the chlorine liquid on your clothes also. It's going to turn a black shirt white. So we don't want that to happen, and so kind of wear some old clothes that you can get dirty if you need to. So I pull our bottle out of our bucket and I'm going to take and loosen this hose right here. I'm very careful not to let it go below this line here. If you see, the more I lower it, the water is going to eventually come out. See, so much so that if I lower it, for example, if I have my bottle down here and lower it, I'm going to spray my hands with that liquid. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is I pull this out, I raise it up, I put my bottle at about a 45-degree angle downwards, like so, and then I just lower this down like this. And all this liquid, in fact, I'll straighten it up just a little bit even further by going down further here.
Is there any use for that water?
There is. And I'm going to talk about that. That we could actually reuse this 10 times. And that way, 10 times, and it's going to get stronger and stronger every time you use this. I'm going to take this bottle, I'm going to open it up now, and at the same time I'm going to loosen our cap at the top. Because this is a vacuum chamber, it doesn't want to allow the liquid to escape. And so what I'm going to do now is when I work with chlorine, I always work from a distance. So I'm going to hold my tube up. I'm going to put this in like so, and I'm just going to bring it downwards like this. I'm going to keep my face away from the tube. I can smell that chlorine. It's very strong and powerful. You always want to make sure that you keep a distance, that you don't drink from it or even breathe the fumes. I'm going to put the cap on. I'm going to tighten this cap down too, just to make sure that we still have a little bit of residual chlorine in there, and we need to make sure that we've got that trapped in there. Let's say I put my bottle of chlorine down, or my sodium hydroxide. These are very poisonous. And from just the outward looks, if a child came along and didn't know the difference, they would think that that was a bottle of water, okay? But it really isn't. It's very poisonous. We do have a little bit of writing on here to show that it is poisonous. So I'm going to take my bottle, and as soon as I'm done working on it, I don't lay it down. I always put it in our bucket. It's very important that everything that we have stays in our bucket. For one, we don't lose it. Number two, kids aren't going to get into it. There's some poisons in here. And I want to encourage you, if you have a bucket like this, that you keep it up high. Maybe you lock it up in a room that's safe with the purifier and the battery. So we have removed all the liquids now from the purifier, and we're ready now to remove the purifier from the tank, and we could put the whole system away.